Let me know when you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Cool. I was 25 years old. I was kind of a professional vagabond back in those days. Since a young age, I grew up fishing in the outdoors, motorboating around, fishing, learning how to play in the woods, just having a great time. I never really lost that need to connect with myself in the wild. And in college, found my way into studying natural history and ecology at Prescott College out of Arizona. The greatest thing about that is they have the motto, like, the world is our classroom. I've been traveling down this long, dusty road. We were backpacking for months at a time in the Sierras and backcountry skiing from Wyoming to Idaho. I even made it to Alaska as a part of that education. So then I kind of transitioned post-college into doing some guiding, doing Half Dome and different things in the Sierras, and then found my way up to Alaska where I was working, doing rec therapy types of stuff with the same kind of population of kids who had experienced a lot of challenges in their lives. The mantra was like, hurry and take the road to the roadless area because it won't be roadless long. The best thing that happened in those days leading up to the bear attack was when I got the attention of this strawberry blonde named Amber. We started hanging out a little bit, and then we kind of had one of these magical Alaskan experiences where we were driving back to Girdwood, just started hanging out and getting to know each other. We noticed that there were some beluga whales out in Turnagain Arm. We pulled off the road and scrambled out across the rocks to the tip of what's called Beluga Point. We were sitting there on the rocks and so close that we could hear their breath as they were coming up and rolling in front of us. There were probably 25 or 50 or so belugas. Not only could we hear their breath, but actually we were getting sprayed by the mist as they were breathing. Like, it was just this totally epic Alaskan moment. The electricity in the moment and between us, I remember looking over at her and just being kind of like, wow, this is something. It won't be long. So it wasn't that much further after that in terms of days or weeks. There was one night where we decided, hey, let's move this relationship forward. It was the very next day. My buddy John comes and wakes me up early to go fishing. I said to Amber, I was like, well, hey, I'll call you when I get off the river. Little did we know, I would have like less than 12 hours left to sea. It was one of these bluebird Alaskan summer days where fish were in the river, warm enough to be in a t-shirt, just enough breeze to keep the mosquitoes down. We were packing up and it's still daylight, right? This is during the time where the sun really doesn't set very much. We're heading back from the confluence of the Russian and Kenai rivers to the trailhead there at the Russian River campground. We had gotten pretty much all the way back to the trailhead when all of a sudden my dog Maya lets out a little growl. I look up and sure enough, like 30 feet in front of us on the trail, there's a large brown bear. I'd had lots of bear encounters. That first moment, it was clear this bear was an agitated bear. She was stomping her feet, hair raised on end, huffing and puffing, and we decided the best thing to do was to back up slowly and to head further upriver. We were able to sort of back off without further incident, and it was a big relief. That was a pretty intense encounter. We started to process that. We started to talk about it like, that was crazy. All of a sudden in front of us, we see the alders on the trail shaking. Immediately, my heart just sinks to my toes because when you get followed by a bear, like stalking behavior or cut off by bears, that's generally a pretty bad situation you don't want to be in. We turned around and started heading quickly back towards the trailhead. In about 10 or so steps, the totally unimaginable happened, and that is that with the shaking bushes now behind us, directly in front of us, the bear comes ripping around the corner wildly at super high speeds, and in just a flash was upon us. My friend John jumped off the trail to the right. Now at this point, there's nothing left between the shaking bushes behind me and the bear except for me. What we didn't know at the time, in the shaking bushes behind me, were her cubs. We had unknowingly put ourselves into the worst possible situation. Here she is charging at missile speed, and time pretty much goes to like a near standstill. I'm having this thought of like, okay, I'm trained not to react, like stand my ground. Bears do bluff charges and all this. But there's this voice saying, this is real. This is really happening. You need to do something. This is real. This is really happening. You need to do something. Her head just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and I'll never forget her eyes kind of burning yellow with fury and her mouth agape. So I took a few running steps and launched off into the bushes on the side of the trail, away from the cubs. And before I'd even hit the ground, she had a hold of my legs and was pulling me out of the bushes. I just remember hearing this pitiful screaming sound that sounded like the sound of a dying animal. And I just remember having the realization, holy shit, that's me making that sound. I just remember feeling the ground moving by underneath me really quickly, grass and roots and rocks. The next thing I know, there was kind of like a crunching sound, which was probably my skull, and I lost consciousness. I woke up 3 or 4 times during the mauling. Each time I woke up, I was just very aware of the presence of the bear, this sense of horror and terror. At one point in time, I woke up and was aware that the mauling wasn't actually happening. And I heard my friend John calling my name from a distance. I called back to him. And unfortunately, the bear, who must have been nearby, me calling out was too much sign of life. And so the bear returned and the mauling continued. The next time I woke up, the bear had managed to flip me over. So I was now face up, and the bear was standing over me with either front paw digging into either shoulder. Her head was directly over mine, and that's when she kind of cocked her head sideways and bit down across my face from side to side and then chewed. There was no shape or form or anything. I couldn't see anything. It was just this brilliant, bright blue light. It was like peaceful, almost, and blissful. It was like really different than what my reality was in that moment. In my current training in mental health, that's pretty classic dissociation. I was at a crossroads. Basically, I had to decide whether or not I was going to fight for life or not. Letting go of life, just making that decision, like this could all be over. It was that easy. For whatever reason, I saw this image of my mom, and she was there waving to me and smiling, just as happy as I've ever seen her, and kind of glowing. And I don't know, there's something about that mother-child love, that primordial relationship. I don't know what it was, but that feeling is probably maybe one of the only feelings that would make life worth fighting for in a moment like that. And so I knew right away that I was going to fight for life. I don't know if I can survive, but if I do, I have no idea what kind of shape I'm going to be in, what kind of challenges there will be or pain to endure. I realized right then and there the worst possible outcome would be the possibility that I would look back at some point in my future and regret that choice to live. I basically made a deal with myself that I would never allow myself to ever look back and question that decision. From that point forward, my life was going to be about one small step forward at a time, wherever that took me. I knew that the only chance I had at staying alive was just to conserve my energy, to hold on and wait for rescue.
Just so you guys know, we are in bear country now. We should just sort of stick together, make some noise like we're making some noise, and we should be good to go. Just a little bit down this way, not much at all. They heard some rustling in the bushes right in there. At that point, they're like, let's not go this way. Let's go this way. It would be like a 15 to 20 minute further walk, and they'd walk up to the next parking lot and then take the road that we just drove in back to get to their car instead of going down that path where they heard the bushes rustling. What ended up happening is it grabbed him there, and ripped him a little bit, and then it drug him into the bushes right here. So we were just like, we could walk in there if we wanted, but literally in the middle of all this is where it happened.
When John shows up on the scene, he was the first person. Of course, he's shocked by what's in front of him. And I hear him kind of gasp and like say my name. Told him right away, like, John, I need pressure on my head. Take off your shirt. Give me some pressure, He was like, oh yeah, snapped out of it and got to work doing what he could to put pressure on what was left of my head. My dog, Maya, she actually took off and ran all the way back down the trail to the confluence of the Russian and Kenai where we'd been fishing. Came out where the river was and there was fishermen there. The fishermen had seen us earlier with her, recognized her. Her hair was standing on end. She was barking, clearly panicked and distressed. These fishermen saw that and said, something's not right, and actually followed her. Ultimately, they ended up finding John. They sort of were the first on the scene and started collaborating to call for help and find guns and start to organize a rescue. I spent quite a bit of time unconscious, I think, and in and out of consciousness. There were several moments during that initial time when Jaha was with me and waiting for the EMTs to arrive where I would stop breathing. Right when he would sort of go to initiate chest compressions, I would sort of gasp for air. I realized I was in really bad shape. I could feel blood pooling in my waders and under my head. From that point on the forest floor, it would be about 2 hours before the volunteer EMTs would arrive on the scene. The ER report said this. It said, patient arrived at the ER in a condition incompatible with life. Eyes, nose, forehead anatomy, unrecognizable. 6 out of the 7 arteries that carry blood to the scalp were either severed or lacerated. Every bone in my head except for my mandible had been broken. Some cases like pulverized, like literally chewed to a powder, like crushed, including the palate, which holds the brain up into place. My brain herniated down into my sinus cavity, and it was exposed to the outer world because the dura, which contains all the cerebral spinal fluid and all of that, had been torn open in 3 different places, meaning that the bear had come within millimeters of my brain in multiple places, and somehow I was not killed or severely brain damaged. My leg was all torn up, 6 inches deep, pretty severe puncture wound in my spine area on my back, and my shoulders and arms were all tore up. That first surgery, it was over 12 hours long. Even if I survived the initial trauma, which was unlikely, the risk of lethal infection setting in at that point was extremely high. When they were calling my parents or my brother, they'd say, well, how is he? And they would just be like, well, we think you need to come and we think you should come quick. We don't know if you guys are the type of people that pray, but if you are, now is just the time to wait and pray. 12 days after the attack, when they started to lighten my medically induced coma, putting the pieces together and trying to remember what exactly happened, and all of a sudden it kind of hit me. I was like, oh, what about Amber? I was supposed to call her. I had this special night with her. I was able to write down, where's Amber? My family was able to contact her, and she walks in and, she sits down in front of me and kind of puts her arms up on my legs. And I just remember thinking, like, in the silence between us in that moment, like, what are the words? What are the words for a moment, for this moment? There's no small talk for a moment like that. I wrote down the word crazy. And she's like, yeah, this is really crazy. I just felt like I needed to get the elephant out of the room. And so I just wrote down, I'm blind. And she's like, I know. And I'm really sorry, And then I wrote down, and pretty much the only other thing I wrote down in that whole time that she was there was just, I'm scared. Let's take a walk on the riverside. Fish in the basket, red dog on my side. It seemed like so long ago, I was 25 years old. I had this moment early on in my fight for life in the hospital, realizing that I might not live. And I was 25 years old. I was not even looking for a relationship, really. So it really caught me off guard. But one of the things that really struck me deeply was like, oh, I'll never get to experience being a father and having kids and having a wife and a family. The real turning point was when Lee Hagmeyer came to visit me in my hospital room. Lee Hagmeyer was a total stranger to me. He heard what happened and he got on a plane in Juneau and he flew to Anchorage and he walks into my hospital room and he introduces himself and he tells me, Dan, you and I are a tribe of two. And he told me about how when he was 17 years old, how he had been out fishing and hunting and that he had been mauled by a brown bear and completely blinded in the attack. And how he'd gone on to finish high school, finish college, finish a PhD, and to get married, to travel the world, to climb volcanoes. He told me that he still owned a fishing boat and still goes fishing all the time. For me, in that moment, that was probably the most valuable resource that I could ask for, and that was the resource of hope, you know? It was the very beginning of the journey of moving beyond the bear. When I was leaving, you know, it was clear I was not in a place to be in a relationship with Amber. We had to say our goodbyes, and basically the conversation was like, hey, like, I'm not in a place to be in a relationship, clearly. I need to work on myself, you know, and we can be friends type of a thing. So I had to move on, you know, and rediscover my new self. Like, what are my interests? What are my abilities? What are my disabilities? What are the things that I can do? What are the things that I enjoy? So it was really a whole new self-discovery process. I discovered music in a much bigger way in my life. About a year later, June 4th was the date, Amber picks me up at the airport and we went up to her little cabin in Bear Valley. And once again, our relationship moved forward. We were going to give this a real shot together. The horrible irony, like I can't even make this stuff up, is that I literally had plans to go fishing the next day with John and Jaha. And so I woke up and I said my goodbyes and I told her, I was like, I'll call you when I get off the river. We're floating on the Kasilof and I hook into this beautiful Cromer King salmon. You know, it's the type of chaos in a boat that every fisherman loves. Like literally the king is pulling the boat. So I was able to keep that promise that day and call Amber when we got off the river. And the best thing is I was able to tell her I just caught a 40-pound king. I refer to that trip back to Alaska as my victory lap, you know. When I came back to Alaska, I got the girl and I got the fish. The reality of our experience as human beings is that no matter what your story, we will all have moments in life that bring us to our knees. Sliding down that slippery slope into bitterness had far more ability to destroy what life I had left than the bear did. This was where I did have power. That was my fight to fight type of a thing. It's got everything. To me, the biggest accomplishment is I got 2 kids now. They're awesome kids. And in my life, I've learned the more I've engaged, whether it's the big things, career and books and movies and CDs and all this type of things, or if it's little things like going fishing and camping with my kids or howling around the campfire with my friends, that the more I engage in life, the bigger my life gets, and that the bigger my life gets, the smaller my disability gets. Stared at death in the eyes and see right through onto the other side. 'Cause I've been holding on with dreams.